Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating and highly revealing recent interview with One Nation leader Pauline Hanson. We're going to look right past the standard headlines and dig straight into the raw data, the emerging political strategy, and the specific claims that are fueling One Nation's current momentum. We're laying the whole thing out so we can truly understand the mechanics of this political movement right now and, why it actually matters to the broader political landscape.
All right, let's jump straight into the numbers because this is the data that really sets the stage here. Recent Redbridge polling published in the Australian Financial Review shows a pretty startling shift. One Nation is currently sitting at a potential first preference vote of a massive 31%. To put that into perspective, that puts them ahead of the current Labour government, who are sitting at 28%, and leaps and bounds ahead of the coalition at 20%. Now, obviously, preferences ultimately change the final parliamentary makeup, but this initial primary vote data, this is exactly what's fueling all the talk of an impending orange wave at the next federal election. So to make sense of everything covered in this wide-ranging interview, we're going to break our analysis down into 4 clear thematic pillars. First up, strategy and candidate vetting. Second, core voter issues. Third, hardline policies and assimilation. And finally, we'll look at Hanson's future and leadership.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, strategy and candidate vetting. Let's see how the party machinery is actually attempting to capitalize on that massive polling surge we just talked about.
A really interesting strategic question posed by the host was whether Hanson, who currently sits in the Senate, would make a run for a lower house seat to position herself as a viable prime minister. Well, Hanson argued that she doesn't necessarily have to make that jump. She pointed straight to historical precedent, noting that John Gorton actually served as prime minister from the Senate for 3 months. So while acknowledging it's definitely a strong convention for the PM to sit in the lower house, she was quick to highlight that the Constitution doesn't explicitly mandate it. That's a clever way of keeping her strategic options wide open for the next year and a half.
Now check out this number, 1,500. That is absolutely striking. It represents the sheer volume of expressions of interest One Nation has received for candidacy. Hanson noted that back in 2015, the party basically had to rebuild from scratch. No office, literally no staff. Today, they are fielding this overwhelming amount of grassroots interest from tradespeople, business owners, and even university professors. It really points to a massive expansion in their organizational reach, which could fundamentally shift local races. But as we know, with a huge influx of interest comes a whole lot of risk. To prevent the kind of rogue candidate controversies that have definitely plagued minor parties in the past, Hanson detailed a highly strict vetting process. They are rigorously checking for Section 44 constitutional compliance, running bankruptcy checks, and screening for any history of domestic violence. And this strategy absolutely matters. It's explicitly designed to secure authentic grassroots candidates while aggressively weeding out liabilities long before the major parties or the media can exploit them.
Moving right along to Section 2. Core voter issues. We need to look closely at the specific grievances Hanson claims are pushing voters away from the major parties and straight toward One Nation. So Hanson attributes the public's frustration to 3 absolute core issues, which she argues are directly impacting everyday Australians. First up is the cost of living. She specifically points to skyrocketing electricity charges that she says are just crushing small businesses right now. Second is mass migration, which she argues is causing severe road congestion and making it practically impossible to get into doctors or hospitals for operations. And third, escalating crime. She claims that people simply no longer feel safe in their own streets. Her main argument here is that voters fundamentally distrust the major parties because they hold them directly responsible for these 3 exact crises. All right, that brings us to Section 3, hardline policies and assimilation. The interview shifted pretty heavily into national security here, so we need to take an objective look at the party's stances and their definitions of Australian identity. The host directly raised a highly controversial topic, ISIS-linked women and children returning to Australia. He expressed a lot of frustration over what he viewed as a lenient government approach to terror sympathizers. Well, this prompted Hanson to lay out her proposed punitive measures for dealing with radicalized individuals who attempt to re-enter the country.
And this perfectly illustrates Hanson's uncompromising approach. She flat out stated that if these individuals are dual citizens, they should be stripped of their Australian citizenship. If they do return, she argued their family should be forced to foot the bill, not the everyday taxpayer.
On top of that, she reiterated her long-standing call to ban the burqa, claiming that a ban like that would act as a deterrent, stopping people with what she called a radical mindset from even wanting to migrate to Australia in the first place. Then the host challenged her directly. Given her very outspoken history, could she truly be a prime minister for all Australians without prejudice? Hanson offered this highly specific perspective. She said, "I can be a prime minister for all those who want to be Australians." She readily acknowledged that Australia is multiracial, but firmly insisted that regardless of cultural background, immigrants must fundamentally assimilate to her specific definition of being Australian. Pressing her a bit further on this, the host pointed out that Hanson had been invited to the Lakemba night markets, which is a major Islamic community event, but she failed to attend. Hanson was quick to defend her engagement with diverse communities, basically saying her diary is incredibly demanding and she just can't attend everything. To counter his point, she cited her recent visits to large Chinese markets in Adelaide and a Sikh temple in Western Australia. Her argument is that she doesn't hide from multicultural centers, provided they align with her views on assimilation. Finally, we arrive at Section 4, Hanson's future and leadership. Let's explore the more personal elements of the interview concerning the party leader's physical and political future. There was actually a brief, surprisingly light moment in the interview regarding Hanson's recent birthday. She revealed she got a surprise visit from fellow right-wing political figure and billionaire Clive Palmer. Apparently, Palmer arrived at her office totally unannounced, bearing a bunch of flowers and 2 birthday cakes to share with her staff. But Hanson didn't just bring that up to talk about cake. She immediately used the anecdote to firmly clarify their political relationship. She recounted to the host how, a year and a half ago, Palmer actually attempted to take over One Nation. Her response to him back then was, "It's not for sale, Clive." So despite the birthday cakes, she definitively stated on the record that they are not joining forces, they will not partner politically, and Palmer will absolutely not be standing as a candidate for One Nation. Looking down the road a bit, the host asked a pretty blunt question about her stamina. By the time the next federal election rolls around, she will be 74 years old. He asked if, at an age where a lot of people are putting their feet up, she actually had the desire to keep going in such a demanding, high-stress environment. While Hanson emphatically rejected any notion whatsoever of slowing down, she claims she's in pristine health, stating she takes absolutely no medication. She boasted that she actually has way more energy than most of her peers, noting that her staff are flat out just trying to keep up with her from 8 a.m. until 11 p.m. She even pointed out that she regularly sprints down the halls of Parliament in heels when she needs to make it to the chamber in time. She actually threw in a bit of dark, topical humor into the subject of political aging and cognitive decline, too. She shared a very specific instruction she's already given her inner circle. She told them, "If I can become like a Joe Biden, just tap me on the shoulder and give me the hill to move on." It was a moment of self-awareness, basically packaged as a jab at international political dynamics. So, what does this all mean? Which brings us to the ultimate question this explainer leaves us pondering today. We've seen the massive 31% primary polling data, we've outlined their rigorous new vetting strategy to avoid past mistakes, and we've heard Hanson double down on the hardline policies she clearly believes are resonating with a frustrated public. But as the major parties and the media inevitably ramp up their scrutiny, can One Nation successfully translate this current grassroots momentum into a tangible orange wave of real parliamentary seats at the ballot box? It's a huge question and one that will undoubtedly define Australian politics over the next 2 years. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this breakdown helped clarify exactly what is happening behind the headlines.